Welcome to Minute House Podcast with your favorite Irish Mexican, me, Richard. Men of the House was taking, so in honor of my Irishness, we made it O. This is the inaugural episode of the podcast where we will discuss the origin of wanting to start a podcast and the premise. So basically, I was sitting at the Waffle House having breakfast one morning, and I'm sitting at the counter, and I notice a bunch of other guys around me sitting there solo, each of us on our phones, waiting for our food, and I kind of sat there and wondered, well, what's their story? Why are they here? Who do they have at the house waiting for them? Are they there for peace and quiet? Is everyone else at the house asleep? Are they a trucker on the road? But, it was just kind of interesting. And that kind of made me say, hey, we all got a story, and we're all kind of similar. Why do we choose to go there? Why do we choose to spend time alone? Which is kind of what happens when you're, the father of 3 girls, or let's say father of 1, stepfather of 2, but 3 either way. I do prefer going there alone. Sometimes I will go there with maybe one other person, like a best friend, maybe my wife's ex-husband. We meet up sometimes and have breakfast in the morning once he gets off work. So that's kind of the story. That's where this all began. But now it's just coming to fruition. I considered doing it as a book. But, writing was tough, having a full-time job. Although that kind of sounds like a cop-out, because there are many writers. There's always that whole, just write something, write 500 words a day, 1,000 words a day, something, even if it's garbage. Just write, which I do as a journal. But podcasting seems to be a great medium these days, so why not? Plus, I don't have a job. Well, actually, I'm an Uber driver and looking for jobs. But I got laid off during the pandemic, 9 months in. I worked in healthcare, but as a manager, not as a clinical person. So, as everybody was trying to save money, like they did, I ended up getting the boot and got replaced with a supervisor, which is cool. It allowed me to do a ton of things that I didn't get to do as I was managing, because you're constantly taking 2 a.m. phone calls, 4 a.m. phone calls. If a physician calls in, then you're stuck trying to get all their patients rescheduled before clinic opens at 8. So, yeah, I got 99 job applications out, but a job isn't one, as Kanye might say. But I actually like Uber. Gives me a lot of time alone, gives me time to think, get to ride around, listen to podcasts, listen to Audible. I choose my hours, which is important to me. I get to do it when I want, around other things I have to do. My wife works, so, it's summertime. I get to stay home with the 9-year-old and deliver in the evening, and when she's off on the weekends, I can go start delivering in the morning. Go hang out with my dad while I take a break, recharge the phone, maybe grab a bite to eat. So it's actually not that bad. Also, I don't ever have to feel guilty about asking for time off. Which you should never really feel guilty anyway if you're asking for family time off. Because, hey, your family should be the most important thing you have. But, I used to think that, hey, I was a manager in healthcare. Maybe I'd become a director, then possibly a VP of some sort, operations, I guess, and be in a place that by the time my daughter was 18, I could move wherever she needed me to be, work remotely, but just be available. But since getting the boot, basically the time is now. It's kind of like I have all the things I imagine myself having 9 years from now, but I just have it now. Sure, it's not a 6-figure job like I was hoping to have, but hey, Can't have it all sometimes. But you also realize the importance of now. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow, so we don't know how long this is going to last, or you can spend so much time basically climbing a ladder to a place you may never get to, and sometimes you forget to enjoy the view along the way. But also, the past 6 weeks have been riddled with car issues. So my car's been in the shop several times doing this irky-jerky thing, which felt like the transmission. I had the transmission rebuilt less than a year ago, so I thought it was that, and it wasn't. And, they kept saying, hey, it's not that, even though it took some transmission fluid, and that seemed to solve the problem. But at the end of the day, it was kind of anecdotal, because what really solved the problem was letting the car sit for a bit. So I thought it was one thing, it was actually another. Well, we took it over to a place I've had some work done before, and it ended up being some sort of tuning valve. Then I needed another, valve cover gasket, then some sort of thermostat housing thing. Got them all done, was on my way to a job interview, which was roughly an hour and a half, 45 minutes away. An hour in to this drive, I end up having car issues, and I'm like, great, this is going to be an interview killer. Imagine having to call the place you're interviewing with and tell them you're having car problems and you're stuck on the side of the road. But I did make it to the interview, and got the mechanic on FaceTime, made sure I was going to be able to drive it back home, make sure that tuning valve thing wasn't broken again. And then I kind of just had to focus, center a little bit, and say, hey, I'm going to focus on the interview for now, and once the interview is done, I will go ahead and worry about getting the vehicle home, which I did, but ended up spending a lot of time in the shop. Got it back roughly a week and a half ago. Didn't really drive it much, maybe drove it to the pool one day, take my daughter to the pool, and then I also had a window that fell down because the door retractor was broke. So one Saturday I spent all day fixing that window, because it's basically like trying to take an accordion out of a small little sideways slot, not vertical, at the bottom of the door. So did that, and was actually able to go back and deliver on Sunday. Didn't make as much as I wanted to, and then Uber sent me a message saying, hey, why don't you try delivering 5 to 8 during the week? You can make more money. So I went out, and actually in about 3.5 hours made as much almost as Sunday, which I drove for about 6 hours. So I ended up delivering all week except for one day, and then Friday I went back out to deliver, and car starts acting up again 3.5 hours in. Previously I'd driven it for 4 hours 55 minutes, no issues. 3.5, 4 hours most nights of the week, no issues. And 3.5 hours in on a Friday when the shop is closed, now I'm having issues. So I end up pulling in a parking lot on the side of the road. Luckily it was a busy area, and was able to hang out there for about 30-40 minutes and get the car home. And went ahead and after that registered my wife's van to be able to deliver in that, so I could basically earn some money. Not a big fan of delivering in the van, and then Uber tries to sneak in this little thing, hey, you're driving an XL. Let's assign you a Uber XL, even though I never have delivering people as turned on as a preference. But, I'm finishing up one delivery, and all of a sudden it says, hey, take this run, estimated 2.5 hours. I click on it to get more information, and it accepts it. So then I have to go in and cancel, say, hey, I accepted this by accident. And that was that. But got a double delivery after that, and was able to finish up the week strong so I could come out of town with my daughter, come visit my niece, while my wife is back in town working. So that's kind of been the past 6 weeks. But that's the one thing I do not enjoy about Uber, is when you don't have a car, you're kind of stuck. Let's see. Also, as it relates to Uber, it's interesting. You get to drive around, you kind of get to see what's going on in the world. Good service out there is hard to find. Seems like nothing is ever ready. You walk in some places and people don't even want to look at you because, hey, that means they have to help you. They don't want to make eye contact. It seems like everywhere, like McDonald's, wherever, they have a kiosk. They want you to use the kiosk. Nobody wants to take your order. So it's a little bit annoying, but it kind of is what it is. I'm of the Gen X generation, and where there wasn't mobile apps, there wasn't kiosk, and everything was customer facing, and you relied on that front facing customer service to get things done. And it matters. I think it still matters. But hey, I don't make the rules. So kind of brings me to a section of the podcast that I want to call Broke Dick. So as defined by the Urban Dictionary, broke dick is a person who sucks at everything they do, socially and professionally. A person who lacks general common sense and self-awareness. So to give you an example, I pull up to grab a delivery, and there's two old ass ladies standing in an empty parking space at McDonald's just chatting. No wherewithal about anybody else, that anybody else needs to share the parking lot with them. So I have to park, way past all these other spots, all these handicap spots, which is fine. Go in, say I'm there to pick up an order. A guy in a tie who looks like a shift manager tells the guy that, hey, Uber is here to pick up the order. It was a McFlurry. And the guy's like, oh, I just gave it to some other person in the drive-thru. And so he has to remake it. But then, I hear the shift manager, hey, well, did he take it? I'm thinking, of course he did. It's free shit. Who doesn't love it? So they're not going to say anything. Maybe they thought it was their birthday. Then later on, I pull up to McAllister's, and there's a guy in a Dodge pickup truck just all cockeyed, taking up 2 spaces, sitting in there with like a tough book, like maybe he's like tactical or a police officer or some bullshit. Just sitting there, taking up 2 spots, lights shining through everybody in the restaurant, So, yeah, what a broke dick. Also, I applied for a job that was offering $90,000 to $120,000 for the location where I live, which is in Texas, but it's nowhere near Abilene. And the recruiter asked me, hey, do you live anywhere near Abilene? It's like, hey man, you know where I live. You have my address on the application. And if you live in Texas, you should know that Abilene is nowhere near East Texas. In fact, it's west. And he's like, do you want to go to Abilene for $60,000? I'm like, no, absolutely not. One, it was less than I was making 3 years ago when I got laid off. And 2, I don't want to live in the middle of nowhere for $60,000. Be away from my family. I'm not taking my daughter out of school and away from everything she enjoys to make less money. Just the bottom line. Not going to move further away from my family or further away from my wife's family where neither of us can visit, our families, the grown-up kids. So, just not happening. But, I think that company should be embarrassed for having him represent them in their recruiting. So, yeah. I don't even think they know who they have working for them. Or maybe they outsource it. I don't know. I don't know what people are doing these days. All I know is, the the big push right now is using AI to write your resume. For what? So it can be discovered on, by an AI bot computer program who's screening the applications in the first place. It just really seems more like gaming the system. I guess my point of view is, where does honesty come into it? Where does, I've interviewed and hired many people. Where does interviewing and getting to know somebody and what kind of person they're going to be, what kind of fit for the team they're going to be, where does that come into play? So, yeah, it's kind of odd. I'm not a huge fan of that, I guess. But then again, it's not from fear of technology. It's just, I'm more of a people person. I like to get to know people. I like to make connection. And I don't feel like in an AI-generated world where you're getting that to do your resume, to be discovered by a computer, just not my thing. Just seems very impersonal. Speaking of impersonal, I did have a group massive Zoom interview with Panda Express. Very impersonal. Basically, you're kind of in a waiting room in these cohorts listening to what seems like a benefits HR seminar on the first day you join any company, telling you about the benefits and blah, blah, blah. And then a recruiter brings you into a private Zoom area where you interview for 5 or 10 minutes. They ask you a couple questions, but it felt more like speed dating. Needless to say, I didn't get the job, but, I wasn't a real fan of sitting in the room with a bunch of chuckleheads either on Zoom, listening to them, what is effectively like blowing smoke up the recruiter's ass, talking just to hear themselves talk, which sounds kind of odd, contradictory, the fact that I'm sitting here doing a podcast. But anywho, I digress. Yeah. It reminded me of company Zoom meetings where there's people who are there for the meeting, they're sick of meetings because you got back-to-back meetings all the time and they want to get through the meeting. And really, unless you have something of value to say or something important to the topic, then how about just sitting there and being quiet, which is what I did. But, there's always those people on those meetings who blah, blah, blah. They just want to hear themselves talk. So, one of them probably got the job, which is fine. But, yeah, that's kind of what's going on these days. But anywho, I want to keep this one short, keep this one sweet. The point was more of getting it done. And as I go out there and spend time alone doing that daily grind, I'm gonna come across more instances that maybe you'll relate to. What it's like being a father, spending time alone, and getting after that daily grind.